Good morning. I am Chris George, a member of your Board of Trustees. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and seasoned. You are an essential part of our celebration today. Whether today is your first time or your 900th Sunday with us, we are stronger because you are here. Whether you join us in person or online, we're glad you're here. We are one people of many beliefs, many origins, many sexualities and genders. We are all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are welcome here. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from the occupied Puyallup and Coast Salish ancestral lands. I pay respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We are joining you again today in multi-platform mode. You'll see some of us here in the sanctuary and others zooming in online. We continue to watch COVID risk levels, and we'll continue to let you know if there are any changes for upcoming services. For those meeting in person today, we invite you to join us for coffee time after the service. And this facility is equipped with a hearing assistance system. Devices are available at the table in the back of the sanctuary. This afternoon at 2, there is an opportunity for those new to our congregation and for members to connect via Zoom for conversation. Reverend Linda and members of our board will be attending, and we invite you to join us. Details for registering with Susan Kunkel can be found in the weekly e-news. She is also here today. I don't see her this second. There she is. Thanks. If you want to sign up for that. If you don't already subscribe to the e-news, you can do that on our website and also find prior weekly newsletters. Drum Circle is returning for the 2nd and 4th Fridays in the evening, beginning this coming Friday, March 10th. John Hargis will be leading the group and Fran McLaughlin is organizing, so feel free to ask Fran any questions you might have. Game night for adults is returning on Saturday, March 11, and you can also see Fran McLaughlin, the organizer, for information on that gathering and information in the e-news. Dave Pettit has an announcement he would like to make.
Good morning, everybody. So many great things coming back to life again after the recent 3 years. You know, we've got the third Friday potluck coming up. We've had these open house deals, and game nights coming up. I attended one of the open houses last week, and one of the topics that came up in that was the annual TUUC camping trip, which we haven't done for 3 years. This was something that we did every year. It was a lot of fun. There were families, kids, adults, always activities to do. We went to a lot of different places. Penrose Point State Park. We were at Fort Worden one year, Dosey Wallop several times. A lot of fun. So I've taken up the gauntlet and decided to try to reorganize this and see if we can get something together. It's kind of late, but see if we can get something together for this year. I've got a sign up sheet. I'll be hanging around for a half an hour or so after the service. If you have any interest at all, and we're not asking for any kind of a commitment or anything, we're looking at a couple of different ways of organizing it. What we've done in the past is several people would get online and reserve a group of individual sites close together. Getting kind of late in the year for that. Most of that stuff's already reserved out. I do know there is one group campsite available for the 3rd weekend of September. And that sounds like a good deal. It's down by Castle Rock. It's an hour away from the Johnson Observatory at Mount St. Helens. So there's some activities going on there. If you have any interest in camping at all, and we've got lots of equipment, and we've got tents, we've got trailers, we've got all kinds of stuff coming. So talk to me afterwards. I'll give you more information. And I'll get a contact from you and keep you posted. Thank you.
As he said, lots going on. It's nice to be coming back to life. Be sure to see the blog post from this week on our website titled Use Your Voice. It provides resources to connect your elected representatives and support our UU principles. Cindy Hackett wrote the post mindful of the safe parking program, but it applies in general to contacting representatives about issues that matter to us all. As always, details for our upcoming services can be found on our website or in the e-news. Thank you to all of you who volunteer your time and talents to make our congregation better. Volunteer opportunities include preparing coffee for our time together after worship service, and we invite you to volunteer by emailing us at board@tahomauu.com. This morning, we welcome longtime member Bob Hayes to lead our worship service with his message, Learning from the Past versus Regretting It. Now, let us join together in worship.
Thank you, Marianne. So as one would normally expect on a morning that's not the typical morning, there's boo-boos that happen. So the one that happened this morning is the music that I sent to Marianne didn't get to her, and we will see if this will work because it leads into the service. That's not getting there, is it? You can go to sleep now. Thank you. So this morning, the lead-in music was supposed to be Willie Nelson with the song, There's Nothing I Can Do About It Now. Now, for those of you that aren't familiar with that particular music, it was written not actually by Willie Nelson, it was written by someone else. But it became kind of a mantra for a number of people. And the words, if you don't remember, at least the ones that I want you to know about this morning, go kind of like this. I've got a long list of real good reasons for all the things I've done. I've got a picture in the back of my mind of what I've lost and what I've won. I've survived every situation, knowing when to freeze and when to run, and regret is just a memory written on my brow, and there's nothing I can do about it now. He goes on to say, and I could cry for the time I've wasted, but that's a waste of time and tears. And I know just what I'd change if I went back in time somehow. but there's nothing I can do about it now. So what about that whole concept of there's nothing I can do about it now and regret? So what I want to share with you this morning predominantly is a message that we can learn a lot from regret. And it actually can be a positive force in our life as opposed to regret, as we all know it to be. Those are my opening words. I would love to have my wife, Patty McPhee, light the chalice this morning. And Scott, our able celebrant, will give us the words to go with it.
Thank you, Patty and Bob. And now if we'll all join in our unison reading. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. And now, please rise in body or spirit and join in hymn 1053 in the turquoise hymnal, How Could Anyone Ever Tell You?
Anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. Could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
I believe it's time. I agree with you.
It's not, okay, just
So
don't move it much.
Don't move, don't breathe.
No, agree.
We're
Yeah.
good.
Stay.
Yeah, stay quiet. This ought to work well. Hi. So let's try this again. Anybody know what a monk is? What's a monk?
Like, does it like celebrate the religion and then?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a leader of, it's a person that's part of a religion. And they can be different nationalities and they often travel and spread the word. And in this case, the story we're going to talk about today is about two monks that were traveling to spread the word. So what things have you done in your life that you carried way longer than you needed to carry? Maybe you said something bad to somebody and felt really bad about it, but never really said you were sorry. Or maybe you didn't do something you were supposed to do and didn't tell anybody and feel bad about it. We can carry happiness and we can carry grief, but we can share it a lot better when we share it with somebody else and let somebody know what our feelings are. And my plan this morning had been that we were going to dress up like monks and we were going to actually go through the process. But I wasn't sure she wanted to be carried across, so I decided we'd move. So that will be our story for today. And if everybody would form an arch so that they can let the kids pass through the arch, that would be a wonderful thing.
Well, hello, everybody in Zoom land and there in the sanctuary. Now is the time when we'll take a moment to share our generosity. This congregation is sustained and supported by the congregations of our members, our friends. So some of you will pass baskets through the sanctuary to others of you, and some of you might click the link on screen, text to the number on screen to share what you can with this community. Thanks very much. And now if we'll all join in the dedication of our offerings. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
So take a moment, bring yourself here. Feel the chair beneath you, the warmth around you, the life within you. Take a breath and realize the air is a gift from the trees, from nature, from the people around you. We are all a small part of the whole. Take a few minutes to just breathe and relish this thing called life.
Hey, good morning, all. For today's reading, Bob has selected some words from Dr. Amy Silver. She writes, simply put, regret is the feeling we may have had something more positive occurred, or if we had made a different decision in the past. Or it can be feeling sorry for misfortunes or the disappointment over something we failed to do. Largely, we regret in terms of things we haven't done, missed opportunities, more intensely than regret of things we did do or decisions we made. A new study reveals that regret is also connected to our self-concept, or the difference between our ideal self and actual self. If you're feeling that you might have gotten a promotion, but COVID dampened the plan, or that you might have traveled to 3 new places had it been a normal year, you're trying to measure up to your ideal self. The fact that you had nothing to do with those decisions is what's causing a greater asymmetry. In short, we're feeling regretful because we didn't reach our full potential or accomplish something we thought we would in that time period. And that time is lost. Regret, like all difficult emotions, is neither intrinsically good or bad. It's a feeling like many other feelings, but it is the actions that we choose following the emotion that make a difference to our long-term well-being. It's important for us to feel the emotion, like when we feel bad about something, so we can process the emotion. Oppression of negative emotions does no one any good. The more you ruminate, especially about what you can't control, the harder it will be to work through painful feelings. So what makes regret bad is when we don't use the lessons it gives us, or when we choose to keep suffering from it. You can't rewind time. You can't go back and fix it. So beating yourself up is not good.
Thank you, Scott. So I did a bunch of reading and a bunch of digging into regret. I've often found myself thinking, maybe more accurately dwelling on regrets in my life, often with no result, but perhaps more regret. Thanks to some reading and learning, I'm changing my relationship with regret. And this morning, I'll share some research, readings, ideas that have helped me improve my relationship with regret, and perhaps it could do the same for you. In the reading by Dr. Silver, she said, quote, regret, like all difficult emotions, is neither intrinsically good or bad. It's a feeling, like many other feelings, but it's the actions that we take or choose following that emotion that make the difference to our long-term well-being. Daniel Pink, in his recent book, The Power of Regret, tells his story about how regret changed one person's life and then many other lives into the future for the better. On an April morning in 1888, Alfred Nobel woke up, opened the newspaper, and learned he'd died. There it was in print, his obituary. If it sounds confusing, just imagine how it must have felt for Alfred. Of course, there had been a slight mix-up. It turns out Alfred's older brother had passed away, Ludwig Nobel. But the press had messed things up and had mixed up the two brothers and had written up an obituary for him instead of his brother. Alfred got the unique opportunity to see his legacy in print while he was still alive. And it wasn't pretty. It headed off with, quote, "The merchant of death is dead." Blaring the scathing headline, the obituary then proceeded to condemn Alfred for inventing dynamite and other explosives that were notoriously known for fueling wars and other worldwide issues. It cast him as a money-hungry, immoral man who had accumulated a fortune at the expense of others, criticizing his greed and celebrating his mistaken death. Now, as you might imagine, Alfred didn't like what he saw. All at once, he was overcome by very human emotion, regret. But rather than casting his feelings aside, as many people do, Alfred confronted his regret head on and transformed it into something more meaningful. He used it as a catalyst for change, and his life was never the same from that moment on. 8 years later, Alfred actually did pass away. His legacy was completely different. People weren't celebrating his death, they were celebrating his life. Rather than being remembered as the merchant of death, Alfred was now renowned as a philanthropist who bettered mankind. If you're not familiar with the story, here's why. In Alfred's will, he bequeathed 94% of his fortune to the creation of a now famous series of prizes to be awarded to people who conferred the greatest benefit on mankind in physics, chemistry, psychology, medicine, literature, and peace. Yep, the Nobel Peace Prize for a son. Chances are you've heard the word Nobel. You think Nobel Prize, not dynamite, not death. And that's exactly what Alfred wanted. As Daniel Pank goes on to say, on that fateful April morning in 1888, when the newspaper published that wrong obituary, regret made a middle-aged man rethink his life, look at what he was doing at that point, and change his trajectory. It was a catalyst for change. His impetus to move forward with great purpose and move forward in a way that he had not done before. While we can look at this and say it's an extreme case, pardon me, we've all looked back at our past happenings in our lives. But have we done it for learning or blaming? For celebrating or denouncing? For learning or for mourning? Let's look at Alfred Nobel for a moment. You see, Alfred was actually pretty atypical in his reaction to regret. Upon reading the false obituary, he easily could have sat back and just lived in remorse. Wished that he had done better. Wished that he'd made different decisions. Wished that he had not ever created dynamite. If only he had learned what people thought of me earlier, maybe I would have changed. But that wasn't what he chose to do. What he chose to do was to use that as an education point of how he could change his life, his focus, and the effect of that on the world for the rest of his life. Why do we often go to dark places for regret? Why not look for the blessing, the opportunity, perhaps the celebration? In the night when going to sleep eludes you, why is the easy path often regret instead of celebration or gratitude? Why is it that I can get caught up in what went wrong, what I could have done better, or what regret I said, rather than the blessings that have taken place in that day? This is not to say that we should do a Pollyanna look at life and try and twist every regret and everything that's happened into a positive. But there are things that we can do to put regrets in their proper perspective and learn from them. With the right steps, you can transform many regrets into positive catalyst. So how should we go about healthy investing in regret? Turns out there's a handy 3-step process for doing exactly that. Step 1, undo it. This applies to scenarios where you did something and regretted it. Perhaps you said something mean-spirited to your significant other. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to say, I'm sorry, to mend that fence and not carry that load. What about the person that you lost connection with years ago and wished you had stayed connected with? What's to stop you from reaching out now? Why regret and wallow in those missing years? Why not start building some new years? Of course, there's many scenarios where undoing something isn't possible. You may regret not learning a second language when you were in high school. And true, you can't turn back the clock and re-enroll in 11th grade Italian, but you can take an action now. What's stopping you from learning Italian this week? If it's a dream, if it's something that you regret, what's stopping you from doing it now? Step 2 is at least it. Maybe you regret attending medical school, but at least you wound up meeting your spouse there. That's a big at least. Imagine yourself life without all the good things, the wedding rings, the babies and strollers, the dedicated years of love and companionship that came from that one bad experience, medical school. If there's been no bad, you've missed out on the good. With that in mind, with that one bad thing, you would have missed out on all the good there was. With that in mind, you might find yourself feeling grateful for those dreadful years of medical school, since you now see them in a different light. And that's exactly the point. Analyzing your regrets with a changing perspective can breed appreciation. Giving objectivity to bad experiences, a newfound purpose can be born, and making a life more meaningful, not only from that moment, but forward. Finally, step 3, analyze and strategize. This is arguably the most important step of all, since it's the one that promotes growth. During this step, you should ask yourself, what lessons can I learn from my regret? How can I use these lessons moving into the future? As many of you know, I've been a Toastmaster for years with the goal of improving communication, both speaking and listening. I'm still working on the second one. There's a saying in Toastmasters that brings this message to heart. Every time you give a speech, you will in fact give 3 speeches. The one you planned, the one you gave, and the one you wished you would have given. It's no different with regret and life. We all go through a plan for our day, a plan for our life, and then things happen, and then it's the next day. Sometimes we had a modicum of control over what was going on, or at least felt we did. And there's other times not so much. But the last thing we ever want to do is to get caught in the woulda, shoulda, coulda. Living a life on regret of things that didn't happen, that there is no way to control now, is losing you time in the present. Time when you can actually make a difference, not only for yourself, but for many people around you. We all have regrets. As Daniel Pink mentions in his book, the ability to have regrets is a human trait that is hooked on our ability to be storytellers. Our very ability to experience regret depends on our imagination's capacity to travel backward in time, rewrite events, and fashion a happier ending than the original draft. Our capacity to respond to regret, to mobilize for good, depends on our narrative skills, disclosing the tale, analyzing its components, and crafting and refining a new chapter. And a good example for me would be in 1981, I was involved in a divorce. I was in paramedic training in Seattle, away from the Bellevue Fire Department, living in a little one-bedroom studio. And finally had a day off and was going out to visit a friend of mine on a Vespa scooter, the only transportation I had at the time. And about halfway to Issaquah, two young ladies rode out onto the road with their horses without looking what was going on. And I ended up having to lay the bike down and end up in a ditch to not hit the horses. Multiple fractures to my right leg and ankle, was in the hospital for a long period of time, was dropped from the paramedic program and was told by the doctor, you will not be going back to being a firefighter. You're done. And at that point in my life, that's all I had. I had no life anymore with a wife. I had no involvement with many of the friends that you lose in a divorce. My work was everything. So I laid there in that hospital bed with the doctor telling me I was done, and I made up my mind that, well, you might think so, but I don't. And I managed to get back to work. But the more important thing was that I could look upon that whole thing, kicking me out of the paramedic program, barely making it back to my career. But what about the flip side of that? Because of fracturing my leg, I was on light duty for 4 months. The Bellevue Fire Department had just bought a computer system to track important information for the paramedics and their certification, but they couldn't figure out where they could find anybody that had time to run it and figure out how to do it. Bob was disabled. I had the opportunity to go in and spend 4 months to learn how to set that system up for the fire department, and eventually became the computer coordinator for the department. That never would have happened if I hadn't broke my leg. I can look at things that happened in my life that, thank God, happened the way they did, that allowed me to meet Patty. That if I would have looked back on my life at any one point and said, what if I would have done this instead? I have no idea what the impact would have been. Would I be here right now? Would I be here alive? Would I have ever met Patty? There are so many things that happen in our lives that we regret, that in reality we should celebrate and we should learn from, and we should make life better for ourselves and others because of it. You can't make light of regret, and that's not my goal today. But even the regret of the passing of friends and close people. I had a friend in my life like no friend I've ever had. And when Ken died, I thought my life would end. But if it wasn't for having that relationship with Ken, I wouldn't be who I am. And we've all had those people in our lives. And we miss them. There's times that I will still think of something and say, I've got to tell Ken. But the whole thing is, if it wasn't for that relationship, I wouldn't be who I am, and life wouldn't have been the life I enjoyed. If you found any of the information I shared with you this morning interesting, You may want to look into Daniel Pink's book, The Power of Regret. And I leave you with this. May the days before you be better than the days behind you because of what you've learned and the actions you've taken. Amen. May it be so. We're supposed to move from this right into setting an intention. I mean, really? If the words, the songs, the actions that have filled this service have opened your mind or your heart or both to the future thoughts of actions that you can take, this is the time to set your intention. Take a moment to absorb what you've heard, what you've felt, and what you'll do with it. Take a few moments. And for those of you that are able to leap to your feet at this point, our closing hymn is May Your Life Be a Song, 1059. Our closing words this morning. Too often in the past, I have spent too much time in what might have been if only I had done something different. The first problem with that is that I really have no idea what the long-term impact would have been of doing that something different. Would it have been a positive change? Negative change? Any change? Would I have still met Patty? Would I have been a firefighter? Would I be alive? I've become so much more aware that I can learn from my past, but as far as changing what's happened, in the words of Willie Nelson, there's nothing I can do about it now. Thank you for sharing your time with me today and each other, for it is the most precious gift you have. May it be.
I invite us to join together in these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
our closing song.